Okay. Hey everybody. So what we are going to talk about today is to think about building a community of writers. Okay, and I'm going to come back and check out everybody's favorite sandwiches, and I am going to come and ask those people who put in the Vegemite. I am still scared of Vegemite after 6 years in Australia. So I'll come back to the sandwich. So this evening, what we'll be talking about is to start off with the discussions on writing pedagogy, the teachings of writing. And then we're going to have one breakout room activities. We'll come back and talk about writers in community, a second one on the breakout room, and then we're going to have a wrap up. So it's going to be quite intense, an hour and a half. We're going to be here until 7:30, and we are going to start with, so here are some of my recent publications and my research interests, and I'm particularly interested in how young people read and write in informal environment, and particularly in multilingual context here. So how foreign language learners learn to use the language for reading and writing in informal digital context is my one area of research, and also literacy through digital practices, for example, digital gaming and augmented reality. So some of the things that I learned over the years, both in and beyond Australia, is that the school and the teachers here, you can see that they're teaching a lot about reading and writing, right, and literacy, and the students are learning them. But at the same time, what they learn most as the user, as the writer of the language, is frequently from the internet. Okay? So for example, they learn from gaming, they learn from social media, they learn from other internet platforms. And a lot of the time, what they learn, they also bring back to the classroom. But you can see that I put a slightly weaker color green arrows there, because a lot of the time their informal practices are not necessarily highly valued in an academic context. And sometimes that can be slightly discouraging. Okay? So in a supportive writing environment, that's what we're going to talk about today, is that the part how we recognize and acknowledge young people's writing habit will be very important. So let's start with thinking about the writing pedagogy, the cycle of quality teaching and learning. So when we are talking about the teaching of writing in the classroom, we frequently start with a modeled text. Then we have share reading through co-construction. And then we have the guided, that's the students start doing most of the work. And then we will get to the phase of independent writing. Now, this will be very familiar to many of you. Okay? And so bear with me for a bit, and then we're going to use one simple example to demonstrate that. Okay, so when we start with the model text, then the writing lesson, you will have a demonstration and have to do the analysis of your model text. Then we move on to co-construction. Then we can use a planning framework. It's a fancy word for worksheet, basically. And that could help to scaffold and support writers before they move on to independent writing. Okay, so a very simple one. Now, I am using a super simple example that can be used in any language classroom. So how do we make scrambled eggs? Okay, so we are looking at the scrambled eggs recipe and the procedures writing. So again, apology to everybody who's still waiting to have their dinners. We're going to talk a little bit about food here. So now, before we get started, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to think about a recipe. That's going to be very simple, isn't it? Okay. So we have here a very standard recipe. And we have the ingredients, you have the photos of the end product of the dish, and then you have the method in steps, step 1, 2, 3. Okay, so when we use a model or a mentor text to teach writing, so we're looking at procedures writing. Recipe is one form of procedures writing. So then we will be looking at the structural element. So you have the ingredient part and you will have the method. Okay, so two parts, two components to the structure. Ingredients, method. Okay, and you also have some language features. So when we look at the demoed text, the mentor text, then we use it to explain the organization. So that will be the structural features of the text. And you also highlight the language features. So, for example, that I use a very simple box. You have the one component of the ingredient and one component of the method. And you also may underline the language features. For example, you have the action verb. Okay, you use the present tense. Very simple, right? Very straightforward. So what we are looking at is that we can see that we can actually use a simplified presentation without the fancy photo, without the fancy web presentation. That, okay, so this is how you write a recipe. This is how you write a procedures writing. Okay, now you can simplify the presentation to provide like a planning framework for textual analysis. So, okay, so this word, for example, you can take out the place and put it as fill in the blanks, and invite the students to suggest other verbs, other action verbs to put in there. Okay, so after you have done the analysis, then the next part is the shared writing, a co-construction. So this is the part that you have a lot more talking, that you're saying that like, okay, help me to write a recipe. So you have a start with the discussion. So we have one recipe here on how to make scrambled egg, but everybody likes their scrambled egg differently. So then we can discuss, Alice or John or Alex, how do you like your scrambled eggs to be made? So we make our own recipe. So the teacher discusses with the student her favorite way of making scrambled egg. Then you also have the very simple way of talking about the ingredient. You talk about the vocabulary. You talk about the how-to, the text type, the structures, and the language features. Okay, so one thing is that in the whole process of the writing, you have the talking, you have the speaking to support the reading and also to support the writing. Okay, so this will be my recipe of how to make scrambled egg the way I like it. Okay, so I use slightly different ingredients, but you have slightly different steps. You may have additional steps or a fewer steps. And then the most important thing at the co-construction stage is that you reinforce the structural elements. So what are the couple parts in a recipe writing? You have the ingredient, you have the steps, and then the teachers need to use think aloud. So then saying like, okay, what should I do next? What come next? And what should go first? What are some of the different components in this type of writing? And you highlight the teaching focus. So for example, that for your class today, you're not necessarily teaching every bit of procedures writing, that you might focus on the action verb, or we could be focused on the ingredients, okay, enriching the vocabulary used here. Okay, so that will be the co-constructions that the student help you, the teachers, to write this, and we work everything out together. Okay, so the next step is that you want to move the student from the co-constructions, okay, that a heavier reliance on the teachers, to the guided writing. Okay, so one part is that you can have a planning framework. So it's more like a worksheet. It's a skeleton outline of the text form. And then you also provide headings to indicate the structural features. You can actually use the planning framework for differentiation and also for scaffolding. So for example, if you need a bit more support for vocabulary, then we can put the vocabulary right there in the worksheet. So for example, okay, so how to make somebody's favorite scrambled egg. Okay, so the first part, if we have younger writer, we can start with how to make it with drawing. Okay, so that could be the first step. Okay, and after the drawing, you can invite the students to talk about it in the target language. Okay, so that's the part that we encourage the use of the oral language to support the content development, okay, the idea to develop. And this is also the part in terms of thinking about assessment. You can consider, okay, the student actually does not necessarily have the vocabulary to talk about the process. Then you have an idea. Okay, so if the students cannot say, okay, we need an egg. So what is egg in Chinese? What is egg in Korean or Italian or Spanish? He doesn't have the word in it. Then we know what kind of support may be provided. So in terms of thinking assessment, the first step of having the student to talk about their writing is the first step for providing the support and providing the assessment here. And then, okay, so now we know how to make certain adjustment. The student have really good vocabulary, okay? And now how to make this happen in written words, okay? So we possibly think about, okay, so the planning framework would include very simple parts. We make sure that they know that there are two parts. We provide that you will need what kind of ingredient, and then the next part is how to make step 1, step 2, step 3. And you can even give them the hints of saying that, like, okay, you need to start with the action verbs. Okay? So of course, that could be adjusted to the cultural norm of this type of writing in your target language. Okay, so you can put it in the chat, for example, that you may say, okay, in this language, if we are writing recipe, we may not start with the action verbs. Okay? So how do we start? So you can adjust by giving the language features in the planning framework. Okay? So each box here, the red, green, and orange, can be broken into a speaking and listening activities to start with. Okay? And they can also be used for adjustment, okay, to cater to support the student, okay, or to make an extended learning. Okay, so here, when we're thinking about the teaching of writing, then the speaking part is very important to help the student to have an idea, to develop the content, to develop what they want to say. Okay? And sometimes this is also the part that when they start talking in the co-construction or even in the guided writing period, that the teachers may have to support some of the emergent writers by scribing for them. So the kid could be saying that this is what I want to do, but they may not know how to spell the word, or it could be that the script is difficult to write. Then the teachers can help by supporting, by writing with them and for them and together to learn those, could be spelling, it could be the script writing there. Okay, so now, before we get started, before we get into the next part here, does anybody got a quick questions? Any quick questions? Everybody okay? Okay, brilliant. So now let's get to this. Okay? When we get into the breakout room, then I would like to invite you all to share your favorite sandwiches and how to make that recipe. Oh, write a short recipe to how to make a sandwich or the equivalent of the sandwich. It could be the bun, it could be the God, I do not have the word for sandwiches in other languages. Please help me. So in that Padlet, then please share how you would like to make the sandwich. Okay, and then in your room, share one. Okay? And you might want to decide whether you want to include a photo or a quick drawing to upload it with your phone photos, and it's up for your room to decide. Okay, so I'm just going to have everybody into the breakout rooms and have a 10 minutes to share your favorite sandwich and write a very short recipe. Okay. Okay, all rooms are ready. Please go to your breakout room. So if you just joined our sessions, that we are now going into the breakout room to write and discuss a recipe for a sandwich. So I'm just going to assign you, the newcomer, to a breakout room. So if you're still in the main room, could you please go to your breakout room? Are there anybody in the big rooms with no? Okay, they're coming. They're going to come back in half a minute.
Oh, Alice, I feel hungry after all of these recipes.
Yes, my apologies.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you for this exercise.
Looks like it's
Yes, I know. I'm reading the recipe on and it's like, oh, I'm just getting inspiration for my dinner.
You're lucky today, Alice. More recipe.
More recipe, yes. That will be brilliant. More recipe. Okay, so I think almost everybody's back.
Yeah, you know, in our group, Alice,
Yes.
Unfortunately, we didn't know we had to type it, so we just spoke about it. We were just two of us, and then we had a third person joining in later. That was group 13.
Ah, okay. So it doesn't matter. We'll come back to the next task. We'll come back to all this recipe. So you will still have a chance to add to your recipe and later on. Okay, so brilliant. Now on
Actually, in room 16, I wrote something, but I couldn't, upload it on the, I don't know if it appears directly.
It could be like, there could be a time lag. Yeah.
Sorry, Alice, in room 3, we make a recipe, but we couldn't put on your site you gave us, but we put on chat.
Okay. That's okay. You put on the chat and Haem will help to transfer.
Sorry, can I say in something?
Yes.
Room 15.
Yes.
I couldn't type, so I write in my copy. I tried to make a sandwich of egg and avocado. So I have written ingredients: 2 pieces of loaf, 1 egg, 1/4 of avocado. I will scramble the egg first in putting upon the heat, and scramble the avocado, then put on the loaf in bread, that means bread, and put it in, and another piece of bread I will put on that, and it is ready.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that. Yep. So thank you for sharing that. And we start thinking about the whole process of writing, right? So then we have to move back and forth and thinking that we actually do sometimes we just need the speaking activities to use it as well. So that the brilliant thing is that we now have about 15, 16 recipe that's going to be ready for lunch for the next 2 weeks. That's really brilliant. And we'll also think about how we can actually use these and also use Padlet, for example, as a platform to promote community of writers. Okay, so let's get to a little bit of the theory bit. Okay, so let me just go back to my slides. Okay, here. When we think about your work, the recipe, and then the writing, the talking about the recipe, writing, that we can immediately include the task assessment. Okay? So to think about, for example, that the speaking and listening is integrated in the discussion of the task. So you can have assessment of speaking and listening. So we could have, for example, Chinese whispers of the ingredient. Okay, and we could also have others.
I'm just having a Zoom meeting, but computer is off.
Okay, we could also have other speaking assessment, so that we could have a checklist of giving the student to say that, like, okay, so talk about your recipe making, your sandwich making as speaking activities, and then other people can use, other students can use it, could be as a dictation exercise, okay, to write down, to jot down the information. So for the speaking and listening, so we can have the assessment activities, we can also have the writing and composing as an assessment task, that we can have a checklist, we can have peer and self-assessment. So we'll come back to the peer and the self-assessment in about 10-15 minutes. But what I want to bring out next is to consider the concept of writer or writers within community. Okay, so the concept of a community is a group of people who shared a basic set of goals and assumptions and use writing to achieve their purposes. Okay, so if we want to build a community of writers, there are 7 components that we want to consider. So we have the purposes, the members, the tools, actions, writing product, physical and social environment, social, cultural, and institutional forces. Now, these are taken from Steve Grenham's work in from 2018, the publication. This is a public access articles, and you will have the link later. So it's a really good articles to read, and it's very simple. And it also got a very fancy diagram to demonstrate how it works in building a writing community. So we will get started with the first component, okay, thinking about the purposes. So let's think about purposes that we just started with the recipe writing. So it's a simple example to demonstrate how to use one particular type of writing to build a community. So when we look at the purposes, we need to think that the goals of writing is intended to achieve. What are those goals? What is the value of writing to this group of people? And what are the norms? So for example, if we are writing recipes, procedures writing, then we need to talk about what are the norm and the standards, for example, the structural features of it there. So in the way, then we need to tell the student what are the goals. For example, that our recipe writing could be to compile a cooking book. It could be, for example, we have an example of Jewish recipe book created by a community of Jewish women in Sydney. We can also have, for example, the best cookbook ever created by primary school children in Central Coast. Okay? And then we could also think about that at the end of the term, we have a cooking competitions, or it could be a homemade videos of that, and it's inspired by the Junior Master Chef. If anybody's watching that program, it's getting so exciting with all these young people cooking and sharing the recipes there. So we think about that. These are all the kind of authentic, rich task. Okay, that's everyday example of what writing is used for. And then we think about the members. The members are included, the students who compose text, the writers and the collaborators. And we also need to think about the readers who serve as an audience for the writing. Okay, so basically, it's not just the writer. We also need to think about who will be reading the writing. Okay. And then the tools like paper and pencil, computer word processors, and it could nowadays, when we think about writing, definitely includes, for example, voice recording, pictures, drawings, videos, emojis, GIFs there. And in another reference that we're going to talk about is that we notice that in school context, okay, that it is going to be difficult to include quite a lot, everything in one task. But they also, the research noticed that there is an absence of using digital tools. There are a lot more paper and pens kind of writing, but there's not enough digital collaboration, digital types of writing, and we'll come back to this idea. Okay, and then you have the actions. Okay, actions, we're talking about teachers and learning activities used to achieve the writing. So you have to bring in the teachings of writing. Okay, and for example, that you will have to use the teaching and learning activities to structure the writing environment, distribute responsibility, so help the students to set their own writing goals, do the checklist for self-assessment, and also to provide feedback for each other's, for the peer assessment. Okay? So that's extremely important. And to have the responsibility, not just at this, the teachers giving the students what to do, what to write, but let them take on some of the responsibility. That's what Phil was talking about in the first session. And if you missed that, you can check out the YouTube link. And also about the composing of it, and the teaching and the learning activity need to focus on the process of composing. And then the next part is to think about the reading of written product. It is important to let the students know that they're not just writing for you, the teachers, they're writing for a group of others, readers, who are interested in what they are writing and what they have written. So that could be their friends, that they could be critical readers, and they could be helpful, supportive writing buddies, and to read each other's works, and getting the community, the families to get involved. Okay, so now we get to the written products there. So that include both completed text and draft, not fully completed. So it's important to get the idea that writing is a process that you can continue to make some revisions and have the draft kind of making more perfections there. And the written product, we're also thinking beyond just words. Okay, that have the multimedia text, and you also have the pictures, narrations, videos, and images. Okay, so that's actually important to think the written product is not just writing, but it's also composing when you have the multimedia components, and the physical and the social environment. So we can have the classroom, okay, as the physical place. Okay? It could be a classroom, it could be at home that you have the writing done, or a digital locale. Like, so for example, your detailed apps and link to the Google Classrooms there for the online collaboration. So the social environment actually can involve relationships, okay? And it can create a sense of belonging, so that it's not just on Saturday or on Sunday or during the evenings that you meet as a class, but outside that fixed class time in an online Google Classroom, for example, or share Google Docs, that we also share the writing. You have the sense of, oh, we come back and do a little bit more. And the social environment will also show you the stereotypical belief of the teachers and of the students and what they think about writing and how they view writing. And of course, the social environments also embed the concept of power. Okay? So if we have a classroom of writing that only teachers got to make the decisions and students only follow, okay, the teachers say that we are writing this week, then there's not a good balance of power. And particularly when we think about encouraging students to take on a higher level of autonomy for learning, then we need to consider how to have a balance and have more negotiation of thinking about the writing task there. Right? And finally, when we consider the social, cultural, and institutional force, okay, so can I invite you to guess what is this emoji story about? You can put your answer in the chat. It's about a story, very famous storybook in the famous movies. If you can guess the title, please put in the chat. Ah, a lot of really. Okay, so the quick question is, how do you know is the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? That's the correct answer. The ticket, and yes, the ticket, and then well, we also have the bar of chocolates, right? Okay, and we also have prior knowledge there. So when we think about the social and cultural and institutional force, then they have some concept about what writing is and what education is and how writing and education is connected. Okay? So for example, in an institutional setting, that formal and academic writing is important. Okay? And if we write a short story with emojis, then it's not very likely that you will get a good score in HSC, for example. So there's certain idea about writing, what writing is. But if you think about writing, in everyday context, when you text your friend, it's writing. Okay? When you send a short response on social media, it's writing. Okay? And a lot of the time, we use a lot of emojis. We use GIF just a response. When you say like, I'm so tired, you may just send a GIF of somebody's like, oh, collapsing there. So the writing in everyday context is very different, and that may clash with the social, cultural, and institutional concepts here. Okay, so now coming back to our recipe writing in an academic, in a classroom context, that we prefer a certain way of writing a recipe or procedures writing, for example, that we will have the ingredient and you have the written steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Now, the interesting thing is like, if we go on and search for recipe online, or when you open recipe book nowadays, cookbooks, that you have a lot of these very visual steps and very visual guide of cooking. Okay, so that you might have the step-by-step. You still got the written text here, okay, but you put it together with a photo. Okay, so the writing is slightly different now. Okay? It's not totally different, but it's slightly different. And of course, you may also have a video. Okay? It may still involve writing a recipe first and then producing a video So you could have, for example, Jamie Oliver on his website, you have a step-by-step guide with just a still photo of it. And then you also have his videos on YouTube, his own channel, telling you, showing you. And I think like somebody put it in the chat is really good, is the actions speak louder than words. You have a action packed of how to make scrambled egg. Okay, so the excitement of it. And of course, the interesting thing is that when we now consider, for example, that on YouTube, of course, you will have people like your video, and then you also have comments. I think this is not going to be his favorite comment, is that somebody put it in and saying, who else is here after watching Gordon cook's scrambled eggs? So it's one of the comments, and a lot of people actually agree that that's how they're connected, that they're moving from one video to another. Okay. And also looking at comments to think about that. And you also have 45 other people making jokes about Gordon Ramsay cooking, have a cook-off with Jamie Oliver on the scrambled egg. Okay. So when we now think about the mentor text that in a more conservative way, in a more formal academic ways, and we look at the recipe as a written word-based text, that we have the steps and we have the ingredients, but what the students see in their everyday life, you have the image-based mentor text. For example, this one, I just got it with from Instagram, that you have a lot of photo or video, okay? And what is the writing is slightly different. Is also the use of hashtag. That is very, very different, because hashtag is using that, just putting the hashtag in front of, for example, egg, scrambled, or recipe. You are making connections with everybody who uploads something about eggs, who uploads something about a recipe on a particular platform. So you are connecting to a bigger group of writers. Okay? So that is not used in a classroom context, because, for example, if we use paper and pen, then it doesn't make any sense. On a digital environment, for example, when we put a hashtag there, then that will make it searchable. And you could also use the @ to tag somebody. They're saying that, like, hey, I put up this recipe for you, for example. And then you also have likes, and like whether you heart or you upvote something, and comment. Okay, that you have the feedback. So this is the part that is very different from classroom writing. For example, that comments in young people's writing is very common. Okay? That is a feedback, that is giving a feedback to other writers and other content creator. And in the classroom, we don't use, for example, peer feedback enough. Okay? But in the real life context, that's what they do. Okay? And share. Okay? Sharing too, and getting other people involved, exactly what you're saying, Sugata. And it's right that, so writing instruction, we think about the classroom, and we think about what students, young people are doing in everyday writing. We need to start thinking that the writing instruction is not about preparing what student will or may write in the future, but what they can do now, okay? How they can get involved in the writing. So, okay, and of course, when we put in a community of writer, then we can also build in certain support. So, for example, that you can use a planning framework to help students. And that could mean an inclusion of vocabulary and grammar guide and language features to focus on. Now, of course, every time you teach writing, you don't necessarily have to focus on every part of the writing, that you can focus on one thing. this week. Then next lesson, we focus on something else, okay? And you can also have the planning framework as a guide on the structural features. Okay. Or we can also use bilingual text. For example, the students could be writing that in English, and then the teachers, or presenting that in English or in the target language, the teacher scribed to help to support the use of the target language. Okay. And we can also use the planning framework, okay, to put in the differentiation by extending the writing. Okay, so for example, we can have variations on task. Okay, how do we move to a different written product? So we could be just from writing a text-based recipe to photo included, to video included, and how do we include the peer and the self-assessment there? Okay, so now talking about that, okay, and I would like to invite you back to the same Padlet, okay, that we see a number of recipes, okay, that you will be in the room, and to choose a recipe, and in the comment sections, can you suggest how we can make this simple recipe writing task to become more community oriented? So we have 7 components, okay, to make communities of writer. So how do we use those 7 components to encourage the building of writing? Okay, so I'm just going to open the breakout room again and encourage you to use this opportunity to take a look at different recipes and to consider how to make a simple recipe writing task or procedures writing task to make it more community oriented. And we'll take a look at some of the suggestions when we are back. Okay, so let's spend 10 minutes on this, and we are going into the breakout rooms. And okay. So if you're not assigned to a room, and I'm going to manually assign you to a different room. I need to unmute myself first. So let's take a look at some of the comments and suggestions for making the recipe writing more community oriented. So for example, here we have a ham and cheese, avocado, ham, cheese, and avocado sandwich. Oh, where is it going? Oh, okay, I just lost that, sorry.
That's rooms, group 6, Alice, that's Al.
That's on the right side.
Yes, group 6.
Ah, it's here, right?
There is on the right side.
Yes, okay. So that's another thing. It's like if you have the it just keep popping. I'm still looking for that. Okay.
In the middle now.
In the middle now. Okay.
Mint
This is
background.
almost too exciting. That they're jumping everywhere. Okay, let's take a look at this one that is not moving, the chicken and avocado sandwich here. So the suggestions could be make video and show to the student. Okay? And the student can write and draw the step-by-steps, okay, so that they can exchange recipe, and we can have master chef class in school. Okay, so we have also other suggestions. Let me go back to the top, I'm sorry. Like, okay, so for example, a worksheet where students are given the following task. Your mom asks you to prepare some sandwiches for some of your friends. Okay, so then we can also have the use of survey, for example. Let's make a poll on what kind of sandwich does everybody like. Okay, it could be a sandwich making competitions, and from the sandwich competitions, we can expand it to writing about the competitions, drawing poster, getting more people involved, and getting the writing to extend beyond just the recipe. So it could also be a news article reporting a competitions of that competition. So writing, and somebody else in earlier also put down, for example, here. Okay, so this is the ham cheese. Okay, so a photo of the sandwich, pictures of ingredients, please, and also procedures of the steps. Yes, so we can get to the peers assessment, and it could be the writing buddies to help with the support of the writing. A photo of your own favorites to compare with online photo, for example, compare favorite and healthies, and student to debate which sandwich will be healthier and how to make a healthier sandwich, for example. And that could get into the research and writing, and ask student to add comment why you choose a particular type of sandwich, okay? And add sandwiches from different regions, from the same language or from different cultures there. So basically, you have started suggesting, and I think people are still typing in different suggestions there. So I'm just going to come back to some of the ideas to think about when we look at a community of writers, okay, that it needs to involve certain changes of concept about the writing. So if everybody tonight really involved in writing for each other and writing together, and you talk about some concept, you talk about the content, and then you write together. So when we're looking at a community of writer, we have to think about the teaching of writing needs to be slightly different. We think about how much time we spend on the teaching of writing. Okay? You talk about as teachers, what do you know about writing? Your own professional knowledge about writing, and your professional knowledge about how writing develops. Okay? So this is actually important, that your knowledge about writing and how writing develops will have an impact on how you approach the teaching of writing. And that's the part about the knowledge about the teaching of writing and how you would approach the scaffolding and the structuring of writing. So for example, when we are looking at writing, we have the students to focus on both the structural features and then the language features of any pieces of writing. Okay? So in terms of thinking about a community of writers, then it is important to encourage individualities, to allow some space in the writing task. Okay? It could be at the end, the independent writing task, for students to make some decisions and how to create a class-based community. And for example, when we look at the recipe writing, then we can actually structure in across the year groups types of writing. So for example, we could have the younger writer, the younger groups to create a simple recipe, and then we can have the older writer, for example, that making a multi-modeled piece of recipe. And then we can even have the year 5 and the year 6 groups to run the campaigns to say that how we can vote for the best recipe. And if they are running if opportunity allows that we can have a cooking competitions, then the year 5 or the year 6 groups can actually run a news report types of writing. Okay? So that will develop according to the year group and has slightly different demand, but we are still creating a similar goals for the whole community, for the whole school here, and also to make the connections with the homeschool connections, that some of the times that the parents can serve as the expert writer in the target language, particularly for example, that if the home language is Korean, for example, or Japanese, or in any particular language, then the parents could serve also as the expert writer and to support the writing of the child. And more importantly, to consider how do we connect to the world school connections of the communities beyond the school, particularly when you have slightly older writers, that we can have, how do we use safe communities online to support the writing. Okay, so okay, I think that's all I would like to share tonight. And if you have a question, please type it in the, I'd just like to open the last 5 minutes or so to any questions that you have, any comments, and then we are, and then we're going to just respond to the questions there. Previous recording, I think Alex said it is search for the YouTube for New South Wales Federations of Community Language School. The reference will be in the slides and on the recording. Yes, you will have the slides later on when we completed all 7 sessions. We welcome you back next week. Then you will receive also a resource, teaching and resource packet for all 7 sessions. Okay. So next week, we would like you to come back for Dr. Jill Murray's Teaching Pragmatics in Community Language School. And could you please hold on for a second? And I think Alex has some very important information for everybody.
Hi, Alice. Have you finished?
Yes, if nobody
okay,
has
that was
more
excellent. Thank you. I was here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alice. That was really interesting, and I'm not just saying that. It was obviously really well prepared. Could I just quickly answer to all those questions in the chat? just use Google Chrome. If you can't access it, it doesn't work with Bing. People are signing in. They are accessing it. I've been checking in the background. Sorry, Alice, I tried to pay attention, but I did have to look after this as well. But it does work. Look, people have been adding their names as we're going. So just, it's probably that you're using Bing, or maybe too many people are accessing it at the same time. So just a bit of patience. The YouTube channel is the easiest thing to do. I did put it in the chat. If you just want to access any other of these videos, these lectures, just Google, the easiest thing, Google. Yes, just the first three. Just Google NSWFCLS YouTube channel, okay? It's in the chat as well. So that's basically it. We do have just, as Alice said, we've got Teaching Pragmatics in Community Languages Schools with Dr. Jill Murray. Pragmatics, really
Excuse
interesting
me,
stuff.
Alex,
If you have-
please
just bear with
write
me,
on chat.
Bear with me. If you haven't heard about pragmatics before, I strongly suggest you attend next week's session. Really interesting stuff. Okay. Apart from that, you don't enter names in your certificate. I'll say this once, okay, so that we don't have to ask too many questions. So with regards to the certificate, as I said in the beginning, the certificate is going to be one. It'll only reflect the number of sessions that you have attended, okay? We will check the number of sessions that people attended, both with the Google form and the registrations, okay? So we do have to cross-check. So just tick what you did attend, okay? And that's basically it. And we will send out a certificate of attendance, one only. It'll state 3 out of 7, 7 out of 7, whatever it is that you attended, after we finish all of these sessions. And you have to have attended live, okay? All right, look, Zachariah, yes, look, if you can't access the Google form, I guarantee it is working. Maybe there are too many people trying to access it at the same time. So just give it a try again later on, okay?
Where is this form? Is it on the top of the chat or?
No, we just sent it about 4 times during the chat. There it is there again. Okay. All right. Look, if you logged in with somebody else's name, you've just got to do something about that. You've got to let me know, okay? All right. Any other questions?
Alex, will we receive a separate invitation for each of the sessions?
Look, no, I send them out just to make sure that, because we do get different people every week, so you can log in with the same details, but I will be sending the Zoom link. So apologies if you do get another invitation, because I do use the Eventbrite registrations. If you don't get one, well, don't worry, just log in anyway, okay? But if you get a double, it doesn't matter, just ignore it. Okay.
So the Zoom ID, meeting number and password will remain same across all?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If it isn't, just email me, because I email people at 6:30, it's 7 o'clock, and they're getting the Zoom link. That's it. I'm leaving you all to have your...
Probably because we are all using the form, so it's not allow us
Yes,
to...
that's exactly right. I think it's dinner time, everybody. Alice, she looks really hungry. She's done a great job. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.